Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. Let's roll. Last time, I talked about underlaboring, and I applied John Locke's and Roy Bhaskar's concepts of underlaboring to Maoism-Third Worldism, which you can see embedded on this cap I just got the other day. Um, I wanted to expand that and talk about one additional thing that I think could be underlabored in Maoism Third Worldism. And that is because there is no revolution in the way people ordinarily conceive of revolution taking place in the first world. Now, I consider myself to be a revolutionary. But revolution right now in the first world basically takes the form of resistance, resistance to first worldism and resistance to the first world, defending the rights of the oppressed. And in my case, my dedication to Antifa, anti-fascism, which I apply right here in the Rio Grande Valley of both the United States and Mexico to the corruption which exists on both sides of the border. Much worse in the third world in Mexico, but still pretty bad right here in good old Texas. So let me expand that notion of underlaboring to include that one additional thing, and that is violent revolution. If there is one thing that Maoism is known for, it is violent revolution. In that way, one might argue that Maoism has more in common with insurrectionist anarchism than any other tendency within Marxism. Now, within anarchism, there are numerous tendencies, and insurrectionist anarchism is only one of them. But besides intersectionist anarchism, there are other tendencies of anarchism that also advocate some measure of violence. Now, I should say that by disposition, by temperament, I am not a violent person. I am a peaceful guy. Whether that is good, I have no idea. I used to think it was good until I observed the horrendous corruption, the way in which the oppressed, the marginalized, the third world, and the fourth world are being treated as I speak. For example, in Gaza. Now I am not so sure, but I grew up as a nonviolent man, and I am not sorry for that, because I think that I can take that nonviolence and apply it in the context of Maoist third worldist resistance, because there really is no place for violent activity. Now, is that to say that I would not defend someone if they were being attacked? Absolutely not. If I saw someone being beaten up, I would do my best to assist them. Now, how much help I could be to them as a 68-year-old man with osteoarthritis and osteoporosis is an open question. I'm not even sure if I could have been much help to them when I was younger. I was always a wimp. I was never a strong guy. That is true of many autistics. I remember growing up, going to PE classes, whether in junior high school, middle school now in most places, and high school, and always being the last person to be picked for any team. I got used to it. It was not very pleasant at the time, but it did not really bother me. I tried to laugh it off as best I could. I mean, I realized that I simply wasn't that strong. Not only that, but I really had a very low understanding of the rules of the game, whatever game it was, whether softball or basketball or anything else, even track. And so I would sometimes inadvertently do something which would score points for the opposing team. So obviously, no team captain would want me on their team. Right now, I can certainly understand that, because if I were in their position, I would do the same thing, I think. But because of that, because of the fact that I have never been a macho man, never, throughout my entire life. And these days, even if I wanted to be one, my osteoarthritis and osteoporosis would basically prevent me from being a very good one. And so I think that this notion of Maoism, like insurrectionist anarchism, as involving violence, violent incursions, for example, violent riots, violent insurrections, is comforting to me, because right now in the first world, we really cannot do that. If we were living at some other time, perhaps sometime in the speculative future, when the first world was actively fighting for revolutionary socialism or communism, that would be a different story. Or say, rather than living in the United States, I lived right across the border in Mexico, or further to the south in Central America, or even further to the south in South America. Well, then it might be a different story, but I assume I would still be the same guy. I would not be a physically fit individual. I would not really know how to fight for myself. I still don't. I know how to do things, I will say this very cautiously, that will protect myself from being harmed by others. And that is as far as I will go with that. But in terms of actually engaging an enemy, I have no idea how to do that. And so I think that for now, underlaboring that kind of violence makes sense where I am in the first world, and perhaps in all of the first world. I don't know. But certainly right here in the US, I don't know where I could be functioning as a violent operative. And so, in a way, that is a convenience for me, because I don't have to worry about it. It provides me with an excuse not to have to engage in that kind of activity. Now, do I think that there is anything wrong with it in principle? No. I think that whatever is needed for the proletariat and the subaltern to establish a classless society, one in which the bourgeoisie and the entire capitalist world system is wiped off the face of the earth, would be good. And if I were capable, I would be happy to be a participant. So no, I don't have anything in principle against engaging in that kind of activity, although I might have a personal difficulty with it, because it is just not how I think. I do not think in a very violent way. But when I came back to Maoism-Third worldism after excursions elsewhere, which I regret, I am now back in that situation where I am in perhaps the most revolutionary branch of Marxist communism in the world, and that is Maoism. But again, I am grateful, perhaps for the wrong reasons, that I am a Maoist third worldist because, again, I am not obligated right now to engage in any violent activity. In terms of whether I would underlabor violent activity, say insurrection, in the future, that is a question I cannot answer right now. I think that is a possibility, but I do not want to state that definitively because I can argue on both sides. I can argue for violent activity, insurrection, and I can argue against violent activity, no insurrection. But again, that is not something which I have to deal with in my life right now. As somebody engaged in resistance, my primary task, as I see it, is conscientization, which I do. This podcast, for example, is an instance of conscientization where I'm trying to share my own understandings, kind of mingling Bhaskarian critical realism with my understanding of Maoism-Third worldism and trying to present that in a helpful way. The one thing that I must say that I appreciate about Roy Bhaskar was that he adopted John Locke's concept of taking the stuff that is not going to work and throwing it in the garbage, right? I think that that is a good thing to do. But again, I don't know what I would exactly throw into the garbage in the future, or if indeed I would throw anything into the garbage at all. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow. And so we wrap up.